Steven here, and welcome to Apache Nifi. In this video, before we get started on actually creating the flow ourselves, I wanted to take a look at what the flow is that we'll be making. So here's a full finished version of the flow. So as you can see from the flow, we'll be ingesting the Nifi app log with the tel file processor. We'll take that into a ConvertRecord processor, and from there we'll use a GrokReader along with a Grok pattern in order to parse it out. Next, we'll take it to a Split Json. The reason for this is to take the arrays of objects or whatever for the JSON, put them into individual records in flow files. That way, when I push them into Elasticsearch, it will go ahead and accept them. And I'm also utilizing a query record here in order to add my own epoch UTC timestamp onto inside of the JSON as well. All right, so this is what we're going to be achieving this video, or working on in this video, and let's go ahead and get started on it. So let's jump over here, go into our flow, and the very first thing we need is that tel file processor that we looked at before. We'll add that there. We'll quickly get it configured. And I'm going to set up for 5 seconds on the run schedule. And since I'm not in a cluster, I'll leave the execution alone. Over here in the tel, or the properties, I'll go ahead and set this up. So the first thing we need to do is add the path to the file. And then after that, we should be good to go. We want to do beginning of file, state, location, local, false on recursive lookup. And it looks like the rest is good. So this should be all that I need. Next, let's go ahead and work on the convert. So we have ConvertRecord. And as we are familiar with now, every time we use anything that's got record in the name, it normally requires some type of reader or writer. In this case, it's going to utilize both a reader and a writer. And that's what we're going to work on next. Let's go ahead and get it configured. In our settings tab, we'll leave everything alone. Schedule, we'll go ahead and run immediately. So we're not going to change the run schedule. And then in properties, let's go ahead and configure the first item, which is the record reader. So we know tel file, we're going to get that. And that is what we're going to read into the Grok reader. So from here, we'll go create Grok reader. I'm just going to give a new real quick at the end so I know which one it is. I'm going to go inside of that and follow it, go to it, save, and let's go ahead and configure this. So we have a couple properties in here. First one is the schema access strategy, which is going, in this case, is going to be the use string fields from Grok expression. So we'll use the expression to take care of that. I'm not using a Grok pattern file. I'm going to be putting the expression in here directly. Let me go ahead and grab that expression for us. So the expression I came up with that I'm going to utilize is right here. So we have the timestamp, and then we have the pattern for log file, or the log level. Then there's a data, which we're calling thread. There's a data one again, which we're calling logger. And then there's a greedy data for what in that one I'm calling message. So this is the expression I'm using for Grok. Go ahead and leave that. Now we have no match behavior. So in this case, there will be instances. Let me jump over here to, let's go ahead and take another look at the site called Grock Debugger. So here's some sample strings from the actual file, from the Nifi log file. And as you can see, not everything ends on one line. And we don't have a good example in this one, but anytime we get a error message or error event occurs and it gets logged in here, then normally there's a trace stack that comes with it as well. So that could be 10, 20 lines. So this will go ahead and work. And what it's going to do is every time it sees this first part of the pattern, it's going to start doing the parsing all the way to the end. Now, this is a great site to use when you're trying to debug your pattern that you're creating to see if it works correctly. Let's go ahead and jump back to NiFi flow. And from here, though, what's going to happen is it will parse that first part, but then what happens when it gets to the next line and it doesn't meet that pattern anymore, right? So it doesn't have the timestamp. It's not beginning with timestamp anymore. So what this does is tell, and if we look at the description here, if a line of text is encountered that does not match the given Grock expression, it is not part of the stack trace and is not part of the stack trace. This property specifies how the text should be processed. So in this case, what it's going to do is append it to the previous message. So it's saying, hey, everything down below is part of what's up on top or that previous message. So that's how it knows how to deal with multi-line behavior. And that's how we're going to solve for that one. So go ahead and make sure I didn't miss anything in there. Yep, so append, so we're good to go. We can enable that one now. And let's go back in there and finish configuring the writer. So in here, I'm going to use a JSON record set writer, or actually, yeah, record set writer. This is the one we're going to use. And I'm going to leave this one alone. Oh, actually, I'm going to go rename it real quick too, while we go back in there. So there's a reason for this. So I'm going to call this one new with array. And the reason I'm calling it that is because I want to keep the array for the grouping of the output in an array format. So just for this next part that I'm working with, apply, run, or enable it. Okay, so that's done. Let's go ahead and go out of there. So we can go ahead and grab our first batch here. There we go. We have one right here. Let's go ahead and list the queue. We'll go ahead and look at the raw text. And there you go. So this is a good example right here where I have a couple of processors set up that are specifically creating an error message in an error event. We have warning, we have warn, error, and then we have info in here too. See if you can find some. There's one right here. So these would parse just fine because they're just one-liners, right? But anytime you come across something like this where you have an error, and then you have the stack trace with it as well. This is where that property we saw, where it's going to append, it's going to say, hey, everything from here down, right here, where the next date that we're matching the pattern on, because this would be considered a new pattern to match. So everything from here above is now going to be appended to the flow file for this one right here. So this will handle for that. We get everything in the message, so we're good to go. All right, so this is what we're going to be parsing. And now we can go ahead and close that. We know we have multiple records in there, quite a few. So before we move on in here, include zero record flow files. I'm just going to say no. There's nothing in it, which there shouldn't be that type of case in this situation. Then we just don't do anything with it. All right, so from here, according to the example I showed you at the very beginning here for what we want our completed flow to look like, the next part I'm going to do is to run the split JSON next. And the purpose of this is I need to have individual flow files that have one log entry at a time. And the reason is for that, because that's how I need to fit it into Elasticsearch, because it won't like the array. Okay, let's get rid of that failure relationship. Set up the JSON, we're going to parse. So if we look at this, we should know that if we say start here, we have one large object in here with an array. So formatted, and we can see at the beginning there, it does have an array that it's grouped by. So we want to take each one of these entries and make them their own flow file. So that means we're just going to do it on the root when we split it. So all we should need is that right there. We're good to go. And the next step I had was that query record, right? So let's go ahead and grab that. Take the split, terminate everything else. All right, so now we have the split set up. We can go ahead and test that if we want. And there we go. We have 3,984 separate JSON flow files. And we can just verify it, that it gave us the behavior that we were looking for, which it did. All right, so that's good there. So we can see here there's no stack trace, so the value is null. And we actually get an underscore raw object as well, which has the raw information. See, find one's a little bit bigger. This one probably has multi-line. Yeah, so this one has a stack trace. So we know there was this is an error level event in the log, and it has a stack trace available with it as well. And then it has the raw. Let's see, double click on that so we can see it better. So if we slide over here, we can see all the information. There you go. So very nice. Gives us all the information we need for logging this into our Elasticsearch index. So that's what we want there. And that's correct now. So now we need to set up our query record. And the reason, so you don't need to do this, but the reason I'm going to add it in here is because the date format for the, you'll see later, but the date, there's a date in here, right? When we look at the flow file, but the format isn't going to be acceptable for inserting into Elasticsearch as a format type or as a date format type. So I'm just going to generate my own real quick. We'll use, now I can't use the, oh, did I forget to set that up? New array, split record. Okay, so that was good. So I don't have a reader created or a new one, but I can't use the, well, that's not true. We haven't created a reader yet for this flow. So we need to create a new reader for JSON. So that's what we'll do first. So tree reader is what we're going to use. We'll call it new. We'll go enable that. And enable. And the reason for this is I'm also going to create a new, so I can't use the same record set writer I have because this one, or it's this one, a little confusing. This one is my new one that I just made for this flow, but this one is keeping it grouped by an array, right? Which I don't want to do because I need to get rid of the array part of this for Elasticsearch as well. So at the same time, I'm adding a date timestamp to this. I can go ahead and just do that with a new writer. So we'll go into that. We'll go set it up. And the only thing we need to change in here is output grouping is no longer, it's going to be one line per object. Enable that. Close, close. And we're done with this, except for we need to create the actual query. All right. So I already have my query built. And this is what we're doing. This is what I'm going to do. So we have the field, all the fields from our flow file. We have the date, level, thread, logger, message, and underscore raw. And then this is my timestamp getting created as a Unix or epoch timestamp. So it'll be the same time we have here. We'll save that. That should be good. And now we just need our Elasticsearch. And we're going to utilize the put Elasticsearch HTTP. We want the query relationship. Let's terminate the other two relationships and move this off the side. Configure this one really quick. So scheduling is fine. We need to configure the URL and everything else. So the URL for mine is going to be HTTP //:, and then that is going to be Elasticsearch 01 is the node I'm going to be setting this to on port 9200. So I'm referencing the Docker container itself directly because my NiFi instance and the Docker container for the Elasticsearch cluster is sharing the same network. So I can just point right to it. The other thing I want to do now is go ahead and create the index name. And then that should be it. Batch is a 100. The operation is going to be index. I don't have any passwords or anything we need to worry about. And I think we're done here. So we can test this one out. Verify that the output is what we wanted. There we go. Timestamp UTC. And here we go. It's in milliseconds. And in order to work this, we need to do terminate. Well, you know what? We can save those. There we go. All right, so instead of having all these, this is quite a bit, we'll go ahead and dump all those in the queue. And then the next thing I need to do in order to confirm all this is going to work correctly is set up Elasticsearch. So let's go to Kibana. And this is what we're attempting to do here. So now let's go ahead and set up the index in case we didn't have one set up beforehand. I'm going to do that from DevTools. Okay, and here's what I'm going to use to get it done. All right, so you can see from here that I'm going to build the schema for my Elasticsearch index. You don't have to do this. And before we do that, let's go ahead and delete the old one. There we go. We can run that command. Should be gone. And then this one, we'll go ahead and build it. So the way I'm creating the mapping for this when flow files come into it, everything's going to be text. They're also being added as keywords. And then at the very end, I have timestamp UTC, which is type of date. And that will allow Elasticsearch to utilize it. Go ahead and create the mapping. That's done. So now we should have our index coming in very soon. We can go back to stack management, index management. We can see, here we go. We have nothing in there. We can check the mapping on it. And that is what we wanted. Now we can jump back over to NiFi and go ahead and clear this one. We can enable and start that one and start retrieving new data. There we go. We have a whole bunch of just flowing through. They're getting pushed. No errors going into Elasticsearch. So let's go ahead and finish Elasticsearch then. From here, we need to set up our index pattern. Oh, cool. We already have one. And in here, there we go. See everything at once. We can see, so it's still got the index pattern I made earlier. The only thing I did on this when I created it was the timestamp UTC. But in case you don't know how to do it, let's just delete this one. And then say create pattern. Here's the name we're going to give it, or this is the index we're going to match to. And we only have the one option for time fields, which is the one we created. Create that. You can see it's all done. So now we can go ahead and go over to Discovery. From here, we can take a look at our pattern and see that it's all working correctly as we intended. So we have flow files coming in for the last 15 minutes. We can see them flowing in, 673 there, 269 over there. And we can see our records. We can even expand them and take a better look at them in JSON if we want as well. So here's everything in here. So it's very nice because this one is a good example of an error. We can see the raw has everything in there. So if we needed to look into it, we have the message here as well. Goes all the way down. And then the thread information, the logger, which was the query record, the level of the event, and the timestamp. So this is the reason why, because the date that it logs was not going to work for Elasticsearch. So that's why I created my own timestamp one instead. All right, so we had that big push right there at the beginning. Now we're back down to 10, 10, 10. And the reason is you can utilize a NiFi flow like this, or a little bit different, customize it how you need, to be able to log from different sources, log data, into, in this case, we're using Grok, right, to do our parsing. And because it made sense, we push it into Elasticsearch, could push it into anything else that would make sense for you. And then we can come back over here into Elasticsearch, set up the index for it that accepts all the information. We can even look at, I think our dashboard should still work. Or not. No, it's broken now because I killed the index pattern for it. But yeah, so this gives us the way to check that out and actually work with it. But you saw the dashboard when it was working before I killed the pattern that I was utilizing. Gives us a way to set up a dashboard so we can monitor our logs, and when we see a problem, we could specifically go in here and say, search real quick for, I just want to see error messages or error events. So there we go, level error. Could even just do a filter on it if we wanted to as well. Add filter. Level keyword is error, and save that. And now we can just go ahead and get rid of this search. And now we're just looking at all the ones that have an error for the log level filtered down to it. So now we can start doing our troubleshooting and see where these events are coming from. All right, so let's return back to Nifi. So this is my flow for taking, really it's centering around the convert record. Now, really quick to answer one more thing is, well, if I go processors and I just do Grok, there's an extract Grok in here. Why can't I just use this? Well, there's a difference between these two that is pretty key and integral to what we're doing. When we go in here, we don't have a way in here to deal with those multi-line issues, right? I mean, it does have some other things we could do with it, but if we know that we're going to get multi-line errors, or in this case, I'm going to use a Grok pattern on a source that I know is going to have multiple lines. This one's not going to work because it doesn't give me that ability to do it from inside of the processor like I did with the convert record, and in dealing with that reader instead, right? So that's where it became more ideal to use the convert record in order to create that Grok, or utilize that Grok pattern in order to do the parsing to set it up for ingesting into our index. Well, hopefully this was helpful and you liked it. I'll catch you next time.